All right, let's welcome in from the CFL winter meetings in Kananaskis, Blue Bombers general manager Kyle Walters. Kyle, what's going on? It's great to talk to you again, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Yeah, things are good. Been got in this morning and doing the media circuit here, and we'll jump into meetings all night tonight and all day tomorrow, and back to Winnipeg Thursday.
Obviously we want to focus on the Bombers in this upcoming offseason and the season ahead, but I've got to ask you, from a general manager's perspective, what happens at these meetings? What are you guys up to?
It's rare for all of us to be in a room at the same time. So tonight with the head coaches and the general managers, we'll, football talk. The interesting one for me, so the collective bargaining agreement got done right before training camp last year. So any of the major tweaks and changes, they weren't able to implement them. So it will be nice tonight to get a refresher course on all of the changes to the CBA heading into this next year. And then just tomorrow will be the general state of the league from a business standpoint, and just sitting and listening and kind of hearing the direction of the league from the bigwigs.
What are the changes that are maybe most pertinent to your job as the general manager?
Well, some of the little things about, it was the big battle back and forth, from what I understand, during the negotiations of the number of Canadians on the field. So currently there's 7 Canadian starters on the field you play with, and there was talk about going down to 5 or 6, and that was the big battle. So it's very interesting that now they've sort of agreed that a couple Canadian starters can be replaced by Americans for a certain percentage of the game next year. So it maybe does affect your week-to-week roster, in the sense that the old days of, if you're starting a Canadian, you have to have a backup Canadian, but moving forward, maybe you don't, because, maybe that Canadian starter on your roster can split time with an American. So little things like that how does it affect your roster, and the global plan and all of that. So just minor things that you head into the off season, maybe the way you tweak your roster, some slight changes, nothing major, but just little things that may affect the way you plan.
I'm glad you brought that up, because, we've spent a lot of time talking about it, and it was a hot topic around CFL circles as we went in. The one question I have is, how is that going to be managed during the game? You guys always know who the starters are, but does this fundamentally change? Is there going to need to be someone that's literally counting guys and knowing who's who every play?
That is an awesome question, because they brought that up when we were at the Grey Cup. We just had a quick little meeting, and that topic was brought up because, it's, in any line of work, the way it is, the powers that be make decisions. And this is what, when the two sides get together, and then it's like, well, to your point, how on earth is this going to actually be counted? And you're right. The CFL has to have a group of people in stands, and they're manually counting how many Canadians or who's on there and all that stuff. So it will be and obviously after the fact you can go back and double check your math, but to be accurate in game, they need to have an actual live count in the moment of snap counts for Canadians and Americans, which I'm glad I'm not responsible for that, because that seems like a fairly challenging situation every single play in a CFL game.
Yeah, logistics are everything in these sort of things, and that will be interesting to hear how all that turns out.
I agree.
Kyle, obviously it was a heartbreaker in the big game for the Blue Bombers, and since then you've re-signed a number of key, pillars of this football team. Willie Jefferson, of course, Stanley Bryant most recently. Got to ask you about your negotiations with those guys. Is it we've talked a lot about, we're expecting this season to be almost an unfinished business tour for the Blue Bombers, considering the way things ended. Is that what you're getting from your key players that are coming back?
Yeah, you know what? After the year, we sat down with the coaches, and we lose a tough game, but we were that close to being 3 in a row. So organizationally, we feel we've still got we're getting a little older. We got a veteran group, and we are cognizant of that. But we're still very competitive. And these guys, somebody like Stanley, who's just keeps winning Outstanding Lineman of the Year every single year, and you just can't make change for the sake of making change. So these guys have earned the right to come back, and we meet with the coaches and figure out in your little positional group who's the most important keys, and we put a lot of discussion into not just on field performance, but who are the leaders? Who are some of the guys that the fans might not particularly know as a statistical standout, but these are the guys that are every bit as important to the guys that are putting up the stats that I think we put more weight into those type of players in our organization than most. So, those guys we need to get back as well. And you try to weigh everything out of how we bring back the statistical leaders and the talent, as well as the kind of the behind the scenes leaders that lead in a different direction or a different method, I would say.
There's still plenty of work to be done for you and your office over the course of the off season. I mean, some very key players that still, hopefully from Bomber fans' perspective, will be re-signed. I mean, the likes of Jackson Jeffcoat, Nick Dembski, very important players. I mean, what can you tell us about how conversations are going on? Is it numerous conversations each and every day with a bunch of different representatives, or do you kind of knock them down one by one, and where's it all at?
Yeah, you know what, I'm quite optimistic some of the names that you're mentioning will get announced shortly. So we've had a lot of irons in the fire. I've changed after the 2021 Grey Cup, where it ended in mid-December, and then it was chaos with all the free agents, and I said I can't possibly do that ever again. So just was such the short time. So I've made a concerted effort this year to start talks throughout the year with the agents on bye weeks, try to not make it a distraction and not announce many guys during the year. But we've had a lot of productive talks with a lot of the guys that you're mentioning, and Nick's going to come in Friday when I get back, and I can't imagine. I think we're almost close. Jackson's not going to be far off. So we're I guess a long-winded answer, a lot of irons in the fire constantly, and I think they're all kind of coming together.
All that being said, you mentioned the team. When you have a team that's had the success and the way that you've kept it together, I mean, it did get older. And I mean, frankly, especially last year, I mean, it was probably the quietest free agency period for the Bombers because most of your work had been done to keep players. When you look ahead to CFL free agency this year, do you anticipate it being similar, or do you think you might be more active in tweaking the roster and changing it up through free agency?
No, I think it'll be similar. As I said, once you start putting the price points of the guys that you mentioned aren't those veteran guys that are good they don't come cheap. So by the time you've locked up all of your veteran leaders, there's not a lot left. And I think back when we were just starting this and free agency was chaos for us. We'd be overhauling your roster and you'd look down the road and Calgary would do nothing. Like that was every year. This was back, 5-6 years ago. And I would say, boy, we got to get to the point like Calgary where free agency comes and goes and they don't do anything because they've got the roster they need. They don't need many changes. And one of the things I'm most proud of, because as I said, I would say that all the time. And it was back then, Hustler, where, I would have agents just say, Kyle, stop. We're not coming there. Like, it doesn't matter. You're embarrassing yourself. Don't quit offering us money. We'll never come to Winnipeg. I remember those days. And now it's, begging players to come here. And now we've come full circle to, the way I wanted it, which was the Calgary method of, you don't need to, free agency should be quiet. You don't need to massively overhaul your roster when you've got a good roster. And we do.
Well, and a part of that is the success you guys are having on the field. I'd imagine another big part of that is what players say to other players about what Winnipeg and this organization has become. And also what the Winnipeg Blue Bomber fans have been bringing to the game in and game out. I mean, we had talked before that, the Banjo Bowl was the big event of the year, and you look to have the other games maybe come close to that. I'm sure you'd agree that last season was, every game was an event. Every game was amazing, and you saw the crowds grow. How much has that helped what you're trying to do in the offseason when you get guys to sign on the dotted line to be in blue and gold?
Yeah, you're right. If we're having players stay for less money, truth be told, over the past few years, and understanding that the playoff money and the things that you're talking about, playing in Winnipeg and playing in front of it's hard. You can't put a price on that stuff. You know what I mean? And the Ron Lancaster always used to say, every single year, Ron would say, after the season, he'd say, just be careful. The grass isn't always greener, and we got a pretty good thing here. And that's very, very true that, it's hard to put a monetary dollar value on quality of life and quality of work experience. And that is what we have in our organization right now, and you're seeing it, that the guys want to be here. It's right from Wade through Mike all the way down through the coaches. We do things the way I think it's supposed to be done, and then the fans. I mean, it's awesome in our league to be able to play in front of fans like that every single day. And yeah, you and I talked about it. It was the $1 million question of, how do we replicate the Banjo Bowl? How can we have such a wild environment that one time a year? And it's like, well, this year it seemed like there was 9 of those wild environments, and it was awesome. Or 10, I guess, with the playoffs. So we've done it.
Yeah, well, you have, and I think that's only helping on all sides of the game. And I can tell you from listening to people in Winnipeg sports talk each and every day, can't wait to get back to that stadium and see you guys try and make another run at another Grey Cup. Kyle Walters, Blue Bomber general manager, with us. Hey, listen, if players aren't playing, if they're in the CFL, it seems most want to be here in Winnipeg. Obviously, the NFL is always a threat to players. And we found out one, this I think maybe for some people was a little off the radar, and Tyrell Ford signing with the Packers. Did that one catch you off guard at all? And what do you make of that opportunity for a young player in your organization?
So here's what happens with the NFL. So first of all, for a player, the NFL each team has to send a request to me. So once the request, just to meet with Tyrell and work them out. So once these requests started getting up to 7 or 8 teams, you're like, well, there's some genuine interest there. So once you get that many workouts, someone's going to offer him a contract, and it was Green Bay. And I spoke to the people in Green Bay, and I said, just curiosity, walk me through the process, because Tyrell didn't play much for us this year. And I said, I'm certain you guys weren't watching him cover kicks or punts, which is where he did, the majority of his work this year. And just to let everybody know, here's organizationally, here's the way the NFL works. Certain teams where they went back, and the Green Bay Packers looked at every pro day and looked at the guys who weren't in the NFL. And Tyrell Ford's pro day numbers are NFL quality, like upper percentile. The kid's a phenomenal athlete. He was a virtual unknown coming from Waterloo, showed up at the University of Buffalo pro day, and people were like, who is this kid? And just blew the numbers off the table, tested like an NFL player. So now they go circle back and they do their due diligence and say, where are all these guys that tested like this? And Tyrell Ford played a year of professional football. He's a year older. He's a great kid. And it was literally based on his performance on his height, weight, speed, and that he's a young man with a huge upside. There's zero risk for the Green Bay Packers to sign him and give him a chance, because, as I said, athletically, he tests and looks like an NFL defensive back.
Well, you know where I'm going with this other one, because I think there was a guy that did have a lot of playing time as a rookie, and that was Dalton Schoen.
Yep.
What an amazing season he had. I think everyone expected there'd be plenty of NFL interest. What are you hearing on Dalton, and what are the chances that he's back in blue and gold next season, at least at this point in your mind?
And here's the interesting difference. So I just explained the Tyrell Ford scenario from an NFL team standpoint. Dalton's had some NFL workouts, but everybody knows Dalton Schoen in the NFL. He played in the Big 12, played Kansas State, had NFL opportunities. So every NFL organization has a scouting report on Dalton Schoen. They have all the numbers. They know everything about him. They know nothing about Tyrell Ford. So Tyrell Ford was the enigma that they're going to give a question mark. So what's going on with Dalton right now, they know all the numbers, so they're going to go back and study all the film and say, did we miss anything on this guy? How is it that he didn't have success, or given the opportunity to have success in the NFL, he goes up to the CFL and has an unbelievable season? Now, are the reasons that he had success in the CFL, was it the waggle? Was it the sitting in the zones, using his brain, all that stuff? And are his skills that we're seeing on film in the CFL going to translate to the NFL? And that's what they're doing right now. So I'm not sure, as I said, but it's very, very, very different between the Tyrell Ford and the Dalton Schoen, because they said they know everything about Dalton Schoen from when he came out, and now they're going to sit and watch all the game film, whereas with Tyrell, they watch no game film. And they'll just have to see if Dalton, they think he can, what did they miss, and does he get another opportunity?
No, that is a really interesting answer, and it does make a lot of sense, because Ford was somewhat off the radar, where a guy like Schoen that played at K-State, there would be plenty of eyes on all of those games as they go through.
100%.
Kyle, where are things at with the global initiative right now? And I have to ask you, and maybe this is, I'm too focused on the Bombers, but you think of Hansen, and I mean, hell, Les Morrow was just playing in the Rice Bowl or whatever a couple weeks ago, playing back in Japan in the offseason. There's a guy that loves football.
He sure does.
What has been the key to the success of the Bombers, maybe as opposed to other teams, with the guys that you've come in that have really made an impact at times when you've needed them?
Well, you know what? It's like we took the same philosophy that we in the global draft that we do in the Canadian draft. You got to draft some guys that are going to be given an opportunity to get on the field. And there's no use drafting a global receiver because he's not beating out Dalton Schoen or any, like, because they have to play for Americans like that. They can't play for Canadians. So skill wise, offensively, it just makes no sense. So we focused on, all right, well, let's try to find some globals that can cover some kicks and maybe start like we do with the sort of your later round Canadian draft picks is, all right, let's draft these guys. Let's get them some reps on special teams and let's get them comfortable in the CFL and see how they go. And so it's just, I think we've drafted guys and given them an opportunity to win a spot on the game day roster, because certain guys you see drafted, they wouldn't have a chance. So, we'll take that same approach this year. And can we find guys that can maybe help on special teams? And, there'll be a few more Australian punters in this draft once again, to look through. And, we'll see. But as I said, we try to, and with Richie, here's what Richie does on defense, which is very unique in our league. And I think he does an awesome job going, and it makes, the continuity of our team and the team morale particularly in that defensive room. If you're dressed, Richie doesn't care if you're German, Japanese, you're from Waterloo, or you're from University of Texas. You're going to play. You know what I mean? He's going to get you out there, and you're going to take a few snaps a game. And you saw it last year. Some of those guys that get out there, they give Richie all they got, and it's, as I said, it's really good in for what we do as a team. And then Richie and the defensive staff does an awesome job of making sure every single guy in that defensive room, regardless of where they're from, regardless of their pedigree, that they get to help us play defense on game days.
Kyle, maybe the biggest re-signing of the offseason wasn't one of the guys we've talked about, but is, of course, the leader of your football club, and that's Mike O'Shea. I've just got to ask you about how that comes to be. Does Osh have an agent? Does he do it himself? Is it with you and Wade? Is that done? And maybe beyond that, just, your thoughts on having Mike back for another 3 years to lead this football club.
Yeah, first and foremost, it starts at the top, and we talk about continuity, and Mike's built the culture that you're seeing, and all the things that I'm talking about with what that you and I have discussed about the culture and the team and the veteran status and the continuity and everybody on defense playing. It starts with Mike, because that's what he believes in, his philosophy. And yeah, Mike just never wanted to talk about his contract, and he'll just, him and Wade sit down at the end of the year and just sort it out. And, there wasn't really much doubt that it would get done. And he just prefers to kind of not deal with it until he's ready.
I know from your perspective, that's certainly one hole that you didn't want to fill. And it's great to have O'Shea back being the guy calling the shots. Kyle, before we go, you've got a job that is a 12-month-a-year job. The phone's always on, but I've got to ask you, do you get a time to get away at all? Is there a vacation for it? And how realistic is that?
It's funny. Jack and I were just talking about that, looking at our calendars to see when can we and the kids get away and do something. And you start, February's free agency. You got all the draft work, and then you're into early March is the regional combine, and then you got your main combine. So maybe March break in Winnipeg falls like the last week of March, early April. So we're maybe targeting kind of after the CFL draft combines, kind of before before the final draft meetings get set in that kind of 2-week window, end of March, early April. Hopefully we can find some time.
Well, listen, you certainly earned it. Can't wait for the upcoming season. All the best to you and the gang out at the CFL winter meetings. We'll look forward to some of those announcements from our pal DC coming up on some of the guys that we've been talking about, fingers crossed. And
100%, you'll hear it.
All the best to you, Kyle. Thanks for doing this, and have a great offseason. We'll chat soon.
Always.